Hey, Christie here from loomingcraftyfiberarts. Today I want to show you how to loom knit my new Sassari Stitch. The Sassari Stitch is a 4-row repeat flat panel stitch. It can be used in a lot of applications. It's very textured, has a laciness to it as you can see, and depending on the weight of yarn that you use, it's going to look lacier than others and the gauge of loom you use. So you can experiment with it, do some swatches if you want to, depending on the project you have in mind for it. But you can use this for a lot of things. Now, I did only use a slip stitch on the ends to give this chain edging, and that's what I'm going to be showing you in the video today, how to do that. If you want to use a different border, you can. That's up to you, but you will need some kind of border or to at least slip the edges, because the stitch is not going to look right without some kind of either slipped edge or border. Not because it curls, it doesn't curl, but because it doesn't look right if you don't use some kind of edging on it. Okay. Now the cast on, I used a Garter cast on. I will leave a link in the description box below of my video to my Garter cast on if you wish to use that. I thought it looked good with it. You also can use any bind off you want. If I were doing a scarf, I would probably use a basic bind off. But the bind off is totally up to you. Cast on's up to you. Border or edging is up to you. Okay. So this is the 4-weight yarn on a half gauge. This is the picture I had on my thumbnail of the lace weight on a 1/4 gauge. And this is my Cindy Wood 130 peg 1/4 gauge loom. I'm making a stole. A stole is a little fancier than a shawl, and it's not as wide. So I am doing a stitch in between when I add on colors. A few stitches here to kind of give it a little decorative look, because I don't want those pearl dashes showing, and you'll understand what I mean in a minute. If you've ever worked like a garter stitch or something, you know those pearl dashes will show if you start another stitch in there, if you don't like use a U-wrap or something. But if anyone wants me to do a video tutorial of this when I get it finished, let me know in the description box below, and if I get enough of people interested in it, I will show you how I do this with a lace weight. Now, I know some people don't like lace weight work, and that's fine. We're all different, and we all enjoy different types of yarns and looms. But I just love working with lacy stuff and fine yarns. So to get started, I'm going to be working with a 4-weight on 3/8 gauge. I'm not going to work on this because I may go ahead and finish this as a scarf. And we're going to work with this loom with a 4-weight yarn. And I've got my lace weight hung in there somehow. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, I use a garter stitch cast on, and that's what I've done here. I'm only going to do 8 pegs back and forth just to give you an idea of what this looks like. I'm going to see if I can't get in a little bit closer here. And this is a 4-weight, I think I mentioned, on a 3/8 gauge. Okay, so we're going to, for row 1, and we will have a tips and review at the end. We're going to slip our first peg, as I mentioned, in the 4-weight I showed you. And then our first row is going to be a knit 1, purl 1. And when I say knit, I mean E-wrap knit stitch. The same thing I used on my stole I was showing you. So we're going to E-wrap around. And then we're going to purl. If you never purled, you scoop down from the top, put your working yarn below, scoop up that your working yarn, pull it through, take the old loop off, and put the new loop back on. Okay? And so we're E-wrap purl all the way to the end, your last peg. And I'm bad about leaving mine on there. E-wrap purl until my next row, and then I knit them off. And then we're going to U-wrap that last peg to give that chain edge that I showed you on the brown sample. Okay, row 2. We're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do the opposite. Where we purl, we're going to E-wrap. Where we E-wrap, we're going to purl. So since we purled this peg, we're going to E-wrap it. The next one we're going to purl. And that is basically the seed stitch. So, E-wrap, purl, E-wrap, purl. And then you wrap that last peg to give that chain edging, if that's what you wish to do. Okay, that's row 2. Row 3, we'll do a very familiar stitch. We're going to do wrap 2, knit both loops off, take our working yarn, pull it toward the front, and we're going to purl that second peg. Now it doesn't matter if you're working left to right or right to left, your second peg will always be the peg in which the direction you're knitting in that your working yarn's going in. Okay, so you wouldn't purl this one, you purl the peg going closest to your working yarn. Okay, so wrap from behind your last 2 pegs, the next 2 pegs, back around the front, make a big old E-wrap, knit them off, and then purl the second peg. Okay, big E-wrap around the back toward the front, knit them off, both pegs, purl the second peg, and you wrap that last peg. Again, you can do any edge you want. That's just what I did with the scarf I was showing you. And the 4th row, we're going to do the same thing. We'll go back, wrap 2, knit them off, purl the second peg. Wrap 2 is 1, knit both loops off, purl second peg. Made that loop way too big. And you wrap the last peg. Okay, that is your 4-row repeat for the Sassari stitch. Now we're going to do the tips and reviews. Okay, review. We're just going to do a quick review of the whole stitch in case you didn't catch it when I was working it. The first row, we're going to do a cast on of garter stitch. That's what I did, but you can do your own, whatever you choose. Then row 1, slip the first peg, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1 to the length of your project, and then you U-wrap the last peg. Row 2, going back the other way, slip the first stitch, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, go in the other direction until you get to your first peg up here, which will be your last if you're going that way, and slip it, which is basically the first 2 rows are the seed stitch. The 3rd row, we will be slipping the first peg, wrapping 2 as 1, knitting them off, pull your working yarn back toward the front in between those 2 pegs right here, and then purl that second peg, and you'll do that all the way to the end, and you wrap your last peg. 4th row, you're going to do the same as you did for row 3. Slip your first peg, wrap 2 as 1, pull your working yarn in front, purl the second peg, Make sure you knit those off before you purl the second peg, and do that all the way back. That is your Sassari stitch. A very easy stitch, very easy to learn, very easy to work, and it works up fairly fast. Even with the 0 weight, it works up fairly fast. Okay, my tips, and I've said this before in some of my other videos, but in case you've not watched them, I'm going to go over it. When I do my knit one, purl one, I go ahead and E-wrap, and then I go back and purl, and then I will leave my loop on, and then I'll E-wrap, leave the loop on, purl. I've just gotten a habit of doing this instead of having to use so many stitch markers. And then purl, and then I'll go ahead and U-wrap my last stitch, or whatever my border is, work my border. And then when I go back, I know what I've done. So I know I purled this one, so I got to E-wrap this one. I need to go ahead and knit that off so I can purl it. That's one of my big tips, and I do this a lot when I do a lot of knitting and purling, ribbing, or anything like that. It just helps me, and that way I don't have stitch markers all over my loom getting in my way. But if you prefer stitch markers, that's fine. I'm just giving you a little shortcut if you want to learn to kind of do it that way. For me, it's faster, because all I got to do is say, oh, okay. And if I set my loom down, I know when I pick it back up where I was. I don't have to guess. As far as working with the lace, if you do decide to do a project with the lace, if you've never worked lace before with a yarn this fine, I would practice with a swatch or something first, and do some practicing with it first before you start doing the project, so your hands get used to using the yarn that thin. And you might want to use lifelines, and I need to do a video on lifelines. I think I actually have a video that has some information about lifelines, and if I can find it, I'll post it. Also, another thing I have found that I do, I've got my yarn tangled up here. When I'm going back, especially with a finer yarn, I'm just going to demonstrate here. When I'm going back in the direction using my yarn, in my non-dominant hand, it doesn't matter if you're left or right-handed. If you were right-handed, when you go this way, you'd be using your yarn in your non-dominant hand, which would be your left if you're right-handed. I have found that I don't control my yarn as well because I'm not very ambidextrous. I am really a true left-hander. So what I have found I've done, and I do this too because I do needle knit and crochet some too, but I've got to where I take my yarn and tension it around my little finger like this and hold it between. You can see I've got it tensioned around my little finger, and hold it between my thumb and my forefinger. And when I do that, it helps me control the tension, and when I purl, I feel like I have more control with my non-dominant hand. And I can purl, and I purl like this. I don't have good tension on it right now. It's kind of hard to show on camera. And then I have better control. It's just something that I picked up on my own working, and you see now it's starting to get a little tension on it, and I feel like when I'm doing it like this, I just have more, because it's coming around this little finger, than working it like this. See, this way I don't feel like I'm holding it here between my fingers, but I still don't feel like I have good tension. I feel like it's kind of sliding too much through here. So if I just tension it around my little finger like that and hold it like this as I'm purling and knitting, it just seems to work so much better for me. So I might do another video on that, explaining it a little bit better, but that's something I've noticed when I'm working with lace weight. It helps me, and I don't have to use lifelines as much. So if you're working with lace weight or a finger and weight yarn, try it and see, and I'll see if I can't do another video on it a little bit later, about how that works a little better with a lace weight. Maybe show you with a lace weight. But that's all I have today. Try the stitch out. Let me know what you think of it. It is a it was like the parent stitch of another stitch I've got. I can't remember what the name of the stitch is, but it was a spin-off of this stitch. It's an 8-row repeat where this one's a 4-row repeat. So if you do a project in it, come to my group lcfiberarts or in groups or somewhere, show it, tag me, let me see it. I love to see y'all's projects. I like to see what y'all make with my stitches. But have a great day, enjoy the stitch, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.